So díomh a cóide agus tá fáilte roimh chuig an Garland Grace anseo na Gampi Saoirí, Tásúla gom go mainisibh taitneamh agus tarbha as. Ba tuacha faoi legan amach an campa a phlé agin inniu, agus rinneid ar smuointe le chéile agus is ska a chéile a bharmid. You are all so very welcome this evening to our webinar in relation to the summer camp program, specifically for DEIS literacy and numeracy camps and the Campi Saoirí as distinct from the other DE summer programs. So our role here this evening, and indeed throughout your journey with your camp programs, is to support. We thank our partners here this evening from IDEA, our coordinators, and our panel of experienced camp presenters from schools and other related settings. They've gathered here collectively to help to support you in your planning for and indeed setting out your DEIS camps, coordinated to suit your own specific and unique school contexts and student cohorts. So during the webinar, we will share some ideas with you, direct you towards useful resources, and I have posted in the chat already a link to the portal on the website where you will find all of those resources if you want to copy and paste that. And we will attempt to answer any queries you may have. We'll be discussing the supports that are available to you as you plan for your camp. And amongst them is the Teacher's Handbook, which outlines indeed everything that you may need to know about the running and setup, preparation and coordination of your camps. You'll also find the self-assessment booklet in the handbook, as well as other support materials and guidance documents on the website. And any additional queries can be issued directly to the centres at info@navan.ie and info@wec.ie also, and our coordinators will be on hand throughout to answer any queries you have or offer additional support and encouragement. The summer camp program has been designed to support and encourage schools to draw on their best teaching, learning and assessment methods in providing pupils with high quality learning experiences in classrooms and indeed outdoor environments. Later on, we will be exploring the potential of school and local environments in the presentations. Pupils learn best by being actively involved in their own learning processes and by connecting what they learn in camp with their learning experiences in schools. And we do encourage that pupils are central in the planning and preparation and do have a say in the camp activities themselves. Also, parental and guardian involvement is encouraged, and from the preparation stage right through, and this will be explored in more detail a little later on. As always, there's a strong emphasis in the camps on mathematics and on language learning, either Irish or English, in a playful and interactive way. The summer camp program is punctuated with many of the ideas outlined in section 6 of the primary language curriculum, such as playful learning experiences, the communicative approach, and cross-curricular and disciplinary literacy. An additional support we have for you is a recording prepared by NEPS that will be available on the website through the same portal in the coming days. And the focus there is on EAL, trauma-informed practice and well-being, which also punctuate your camps. So I will hand over to my colleague Ultan to carry you through the next section of our training this evening. Thank you very much.
Gaurav Mila Mahagad Aideen, and thank you very much to everybody. Mahagad Asok Tacht Anocht. You're very good for giving up your evening, and I really appreciate it, as I know Aideen does, appreciates your efforts thus far, and thank you very much. So this evening, our aims and learning outcomes are very, very simple. It's really to support you to plan and run your summer camps. You know best what works in your school community, and you know best what fits with your DEIS plan. So we're just supporting you around that. So this evening, we'll be examining the vision, principles, domains, and success criteria. You'll be given lots of concrete examples and where to get resources for teaching preparation and assessment. And there'll also be an emphasis on, what will happen in the school and beyond. So, bringing the camp outside of the four walls of the school. I'd like to introduce this evening those who will be guiding us. So from IDEA, we have David O'Callaghan, Cruthar O'Leary, and Kate Liston, and they've done huge work, particularly Kate, in putting together these slides that you'll see this evening. So go to Mila Mahov. We have two practicing Muntori or Prividi. We have Kira Rowley, who's in Atimas National School in Mayo, and Alan Nelson, who's the coordinator of the DEIS Camps of Spirla, and Alan works in St. Joseph's in Dundalk. Joining us from the Limerick camp, we have Carmel O'Doherty, who's here representing the Inspectorate and the Department this evening. We have Dahi O'Murrocho, who's here with Dublin West Education Centre. Dahi is the coordinator for the County Gaige. I'm Alton McMahon. I'm the director at Dublin West, and just chatting to previously was Aideen McGovern, and Aideen is the director in Navan. All that's left really for me to do is to wish you the very best. You're going to learn lots tonight, even if you've come to this before. This has been renewed, and the slideshow and the contents have been renewed. Thank you again, Kate. And I think you're going to pick up lots. So the slideshow itself will be available in the Padlet afterwards. So don't worry if you've missed anything. You'll get it all in good time. But best of luck, enjoy it, and I hand you on now to the next slide. Go to Mila Mahov.
Shiver ma has got into the Dahi and show. You're all welcome again. My God, Aideen, Alton, Kate, agus Gachtina, we actually have more than the Spartans on tonight. I wonder why you think I've mentioned Spartans. Well, 2024 is Olympic year. Now we've got the County Gaige, and we've got the County Verla. And my God, many of you might go for the theme of Olympics. But the whole rationale behind our camps, and we know this because we work with these kids every day. So we're dealing with the most vulnerable. And in dealing with that, we're also dealing with families. And we're dealing with children every day who are coming to school with incredible stories. So first of all, we want to acknowledge, as former principal of DEIS School and as everyone who's worked in DEIS, want to acknowledge the incredible work you do every year. Our motto has always been the same. Is Féidir Ling. Obama robbed that from us, by the way, but we can give him that one. But is Féidir Ling. We can do it. And let's do it for the kids, because in the rationale, what we're looking at here is the sense of, we're looking at a summer camp to provide as many playful, meaningful learning environments as possible, both indoors and outdoors. And indeed, looking at the Inspectorate, what they wrote about last year, it's a sense of, let's get the kids out. Let's get the kids involved in the actual planning of the camp. Let's allow them to have their say in what will happen. Let's get the parents involved in that also. And let's look at some reflective work. But the whole rationale here is that the design and organization of the program should enable the students to say and to have an opportunity to say what they've learned, how they've learned it, and what they're doing each day, and feel that there's an ownership there. And the same thing with the parents. Try to get them involved, and we'll be dealing with that later when it comes to various areas of vetting, etc., etc. So don't worry about that too much. But the main aims of the rationale are, we're supporting the pupils' social, physical, and emotional well-being. And indeed, NEPS have put together some incredible recordings, and Dr. Aideen has put a link into the chat where you can link to the website with all of the resources there. And by the way, if you want to look at this rationale again yourselves, it's on page 4 of the actual 2024 summer booklet. So the pupils are trying to build relationships with their peers, with the teachers, and to support their connection with the school. Because all the time, as David and Crahor will talk about, we're working within our DEIS plan, and we're trying to develop that DEIS plan in a playful, zero stress, gan vrú, gan stress. Do it in an environment which is there to encourage that meaningful connection. And let's try to provide a rich educational experience for each of them in whatever environment you have. You've got the technology. Let's get them out there enjoying that. Let's bring well-being into this, but let's let them breathe. Whether it's a question of doing yoga in the morning, whether it's a question of looking at TG Car or a Kula Car, whether it's looking at the RTE player, allowing that sense of bringing the whole essence of what we're about in the summer camps, our rationale, and doing that in a fun way through numeracy and literacy. And Crahor and David will be referring to that. And numeracy and literacy, whether it's a literacy trail or whether it's a numeracy trail, it's all about. So our rationale is simple. Is Féidir Ling, and let everyone buy into this, because we are who we are. Next slide, Kate. So again, the whole idea of the aims, like we said, the specific idea, like, and I've covered most of these, so I'm not going to worry about it. So let's keep going, Kate. The whole idea of the social, physical, emotional well-being. How can you build this relationship? How can you provide these environments? You're doing this every day. So now there's an opportunity to do this. And by the way, we want to thank you all, because let's be honest, we know there's a huge shortage of teachers. We know that there are problems at the moment in education. We know that you're stressed out. My God, I think as a chairperson of a school right now, we can see this. So, Gurv Mila Magriv. But in promoting that sense of well-being, that sense of connectivity, that sense of ownership, in the background, the skills of numeracy and literacy, and particularly if you're dealing, and will be dealt with later, students who are EAL, and a lot of our schools have a lot of these students now where English is maybe, my God, not even their first or second language at home. So remember, less is more. Fun learning, playful learning. Kate, let's keep going with the HUD. The camp organizer. This again this year. The camp organizer is the person who's responsible for planning and preparation before the commencement of the camp. In other words, the camp organizer, since you've got your permission, is the person now putting together the timetable. Please keep clicking through, Kate. Is the person who is looking at the actual training. If you need that extra training, again, go to the link that's there. If you need an extra training in NEPS because you're not the DLP, etc., that is linked in there. You're organizing the materials and the resources. And this year you're receiving the funding to do that. Again, with the food and being able to get those resources into the school. You're looking to recruit staff. And if there are teachers on your staff who, for example, are not, well, teachers who are not in your staff, remember, once they're qualified, you can bring them in, but make sure they understand your DEIS plan, the essence, the vision, the ethos of your school. Same thing with SNAs. So safeguarding procedures, planning documents, school policies are all put together by the organizer. Collaborative planning with the manager. We'll come to that in a moment. There's a big difference between organizer and manager, okay? Organizer is like before. It's like the organizer, putting it very simply, if this was a maternity ward, the organizer brings into the maternity delivery, and then the manager takes over when they get in there. So that sense of developing programs of activities, looking at timetables, designing the timetables, getting the children to buy into it, to give their feedback, to be part of the program, and then, after those 9 months, hand over to the program manager. So organizer organizes. And the whole thing is really, everything should be there to hand over to the manager. Again, it's in the booklet. Kate, please. So the program manager, liaising, of course, leis an Ryan, August Skillina, coming into the sense of the parents, a point of contact at all times. If there's anything that's happening, the minute that that first morning comes, the program manager is the person responsible. You're liaising with the staff. You're there all the time. You're not skiving off down to have a cup of coffee. Come on, let's be honest, because if anything happens, it's on your watch. You are the manager. And just to say something that did turn up, if the class is going out somewhere for an hour or two to the library and Laurelin are going down to the park, stick an old page up in the front door, Tommy the Muck Fin Air, or put a mobile number there, because if someone arrives and you're not in the school, first of all, it's disappointing for them. And also you've missed an opportunity to liaise with someone. So let everyone know, the manager, your job is to manage. So you're dealing with issues if there's transport, if you're going on maybe a little school tour, Trusculla, or going to the Laurelin, or you're going over Shoeloid, or you're going into the park or something like that. Make sure everyone knows what's happening. And then at the very end, it's your responsibility to ensure that the returns are completed, not only for the education centres, because every year, I'm going to be tough on you here. Every year, there's always one. My God, it's like the lads. There's always one or two who seem to forget to send in the documentation. It's very important that you would do that. So come on, let's get that in there. And also, the evaluations, as we said, are returned to the centres and are completed. And indeed, any form of official communication during that week is the responsibility of the manager. And more importantly, the manager is not a teacher. Okay? So your job is to manage, organizes, hands over to the manager. Manager then basically manages it for the week. And that's important. Again, that's all explained in the booklet. Okay, Kate, let the HUD. Hand over now, do I? someone did put in a question and you asked, what were the hours? 22.5 hours of the course during the week. Starting time no later than 10 a.m. And the reason being is you want to give them a chance to get into school, but once you go beyond 10 a.m., it's a problem. By the way, I'd say to the manager, have the phone numbers of the parents so that if someone doesn't turn up, and have a couple of spares there too, because you need to get on to the parents if the kids are not coming in and kind of say, what are we going to do here? And I know we're going to come into it later. Maybe with the funding you have, buy the lovely book of tickets, catch them doing the right thing, give them X amount of tickets. And during the day, if you have a shopper and they can come up and have it, you can have little prizes for maybe 4 or 5 tickets. So the kids want to come in. Stick or carrot. Carrot works incredibly well. Catch them doing the right things. So in addition to the 4 hours instruction, you also have 30 minutes set aside for fully supervised lunch break period. Now, one thing that we've seen in the past, again, sometimes some of the camps have tried to include breakfast as part of the camp. Breakfasta or breakfast club is a breakfast club. That's not included. That's why we're saying don't start later than 10 a.m., but you can't include the breakfast club as part of the actual camp. So if kids come in, of course, if you want to do baking during the day, or if you want to show them how to cook their own meal, or if you want to basically do pizza or different things like that, then that's okay. But just remember that instruction time is different to many others, okay? Again, if in doubt, you've got all the emails that Aideen is putting in right now into the chat. And so if you have any questions on this, please just throw them in, all right? So handing over to the checklist. Go to me, Margaret.
Good evening, folks. My name is Alan Nelson. As the guy said, sorry. Good evening, folks. I'm Alan Nelson. I work in St. Joseph's National School in Dundalk, and I've been involved with DEIS summer camps now for over 10 years, and I've been working with Navan Education Centre as a coordinator now for the last few years as well. Dahi has mentioned a lot of things there in his introduction, and a lot of the things I'm going to mention now have been mentioned by Dahi already and will be mentioned again throughout the course of the evening. What I'm going to do is sort of go through a checklist of the things you need to do as an organisation manager, as a teacher, as a board of management, to make sure that your school is camp ready. Though we had a lot of questions about this last year. Oh, can you please tell us what are the exact things we need to do beforehand to make sure we're ready in case we get any visitors to the camp? It's a case of really setting these things out, getting them set in stone, making sure you put a bit into the planning phase, and then all these boxes are ticked, everyone's ready to go, and the teachers can get on then with the fun, engaging activities and making sure everyone has a good time. So if you'll bear with me, fight through this list now, and as I said, Dahi has mentioned some of these things already, and you'll hear more about them again later, but you need to make sure that child protection procedures are in place and they underpin the activities of the camp. Risk assessment and child safeguarding statement, that should also be updated and include the camp as well. Teachers and other school personnel should be aware of responsibilities for child protection and anti-bullying. We're all aware of these things. We're working in DEIS schools. We're dealing with them on a daily basis, but it's just to make sure that we don't have schools that are not up to date with these things. The DLP and DDLP, they obviously must be on site and their names must be displayed prominently throughout the camp. And if the DLP and DDLP are not going to be on site during the camp, we need to have acting DLP and DDLP. That training for that is available, and a link will be in the chat below. Very important. I got a number of queries about last year. I know a lot of people were concerned about it, so that training is available and the link will be in the chat below. The safeguarding statement must also be displayed in the camp as well. Any legal arrangements, this for the board of management, suitable accommodation, the appointment of the organizer and the manager, and the engagement of qualified teachers needs to be done obviously well in advance. Most of you have done that already if you're here tonight. The camp needs to be planned. You're going to hear this a lot, but parental involvement is so important, and you need to make sure it happens, and the pupils having some ownership and some involvement in the planning of the camp as well. Essential. We'll give you more details about it later, but there were actually some camps last year who didn't do, and they're fundamentals for how DEIS camps have been running. We've really made it as a huge aspect to have your parents off, to build meaningful relationships with parents. So you need to make sure you have that, and we'll speak more about that later. You need to make sure you target the pupils that have the greatest needs. It nearly goes in, but you have to be clever about your planning. Make sure you target those kids, the most marginalized, and make sure you get them involved in the camp and do what you need to do. Liaise with HSC, but get those kids in during the summer for your camp. You need to make sure you've got financial oversight and retaining receipts, etc. And you need to make sure you maintain daily attendance records, prepare the report at the end, get that sent in, and make sure that all personnel, anyone who's not training on here tonight, needs to make sure they get involved with the training before they begin working in the camp. So that's a checklist, I suppose. If you put that in place, then you get on with the fun activities, the learning, the teaching, the whole camp experience itself for teachers and pupils is a very positive one. We've always found that over the years. It's really, the juice is always worth the squeeze. Everyone gets great enjoyment of the camps, and we have so many positives at the end. What I was going to do now at this point is just tell you some of the feedback that we got last year from principals, even from parents, and from teachers who worked on the camps. Some of the things that you can expect if you're new to these camps. What can you expect? What are the positives to take from this experience? Well, the level of student enjoyment is always really high. The fact that you get to spend quality time with teaching students in small groups. You get great opportunities to use the full school campus and all the resources available in your school, the technology, the things that some of the classes do not get access to during the year. They're all available during the camp, and the kids and the teachers love getting a chance with that. The bonding of the students, students working with kids who are older than them and younger than them, the sort of sense of camaraderie that creates, sense of teamwork and a bond that can be continued then when you go back to school in September. That sense of achievement that students get, those most at risk, the ones that maybe have a tough time during the year, they get a real sense of achievement when they complete challenges during the summer camp, when they are involved in tasks and fun activities, and they have a completely different experience of school life for that full week. It's really rewarding then for teachers to give students that opportunity. Teachers get great sense of pride then in maybe taking those students out on daily visits and community visits, and they get to show them off in a positive manner, and it's a great feeling for the teachers as well. And as a final one was, it's an uplifting experience with invaluable learning for everyone involved. So that's the sort of positives that we're hoping for. What I'm going to do now is bring in Ciara. Ciara has been working on camps for the last few years as a principal, and she's had a really positive experience, and she's going to share some of that with you now. So I'll bring Ciara in.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, I'm a principal of a Jesh rural school. We're just a 2-teacher school with a SET as well. And we started our Jesh camp in 2021. So this will be our 4th year running the camp. And I just back up all those testimonials that Alan referred to there. Just, it's been very positive. The children enjoy it. They get so much more time to engage with playful learning experiences in a small group. And generally we've had outside teachers, teachers that don't teach in our school have taught on the camps, and so that's different for the children, because I suppose in a small school, in a multi-class setting, you know, the children might have the same teacher for a number of years, so it's nice, it's different for them to have a different teacher working in the small group. And I myself have usually been the organizer and the manager. That's just the way it works, because I'm the only permanent member of staff working with the camp. So it gives me an opportunity to really, when I'm there as manager, to engage more with the children, and not as their teacher, I suppose, to talk to them about whatever activity they're taking part in, to really, you know, build up those language experiences of what they're engaging in. And just as regards the teachers, I recruit the teachers, and I generally, you know, might talk to them. We, you know, communicate via WhatsApp. Sometimes we might have a Zoom call in advance of the camp, just to talk about, you know, timetables and our plans for the camp, and that works really well as well. So overall, it's been very positive in our school, and the children are looking forward to it this year again. And you know, they're good there. I plan on meeting with when I finalized exactly just maybe 1 or 2 that I still have to finalize as regards the children that are going to take part in this year's camp. I'm going to meet with them and talk with them about, you know, the activities, get some of their input on what they'd like for this year. So that.
Thank you very much, Ciara. That's fantastic. My next job, and it's the next slide, please. Yeah, it's just to talk to you about additional guidance. It's available from Navan and Dublin West Education Centres. The links are above, they're on the slide, and as I said, these slides will all be available after in the Padlet. What I want to say is, as a coordinator, I will contact all schools involved in summer camps through email at just before the camp time begins, and I'll send you some links, some resources, some reminders of the things that you might want to get involved in, and then you'll have my email address. And if you have any queries, any problems throughout the summer, you can contact me. And if you'd like to speak by phone, you can contact me by email, and we can arrange a time that's suited, and we can have a chat about any concerns or queries that you may have, or even if you're looking for ideas about camp activities or a learning experience that you'd like to try out and you want to just ask me about it, I'll be available to do that throughout the summer. What I would recommend is, and I was nearly reluctant to say this when I started this job a number of years ago, but without coming across, is please read the handbook. Like, there are people who have contacted me over the last number of years, and it was very obvious that page 1, question 1, it's all there. I can't stress this enough. If you read the handbook before you even start on anything else, just give it a good, it's not that long, and everything is in there. It's very helpful. Anything you need to run a successful camp is in there. Give it a good read, and then when you start to plan, it'll all come together. It'll make sense. You'll have ticked all the right boxes, and then you're not worried about anyone coming in to visit. You'll nearly be looking forward to, could you be saying, I'm ready, this camp's going to be fantastic, I'm going to show kids, I'm going to show off my school, and I'm going to show what I can do as a teacher, and it's a really positive experience. Just before we, I mentioned this already, but before we go on to the paddling and the resources, just to mention again, you'll hear there will be some schools that will have a visit from the inspectorate. It's hugely important for us. These visits are to affirm the work that goes on in DEIS camps. It's maybe unseen by people, but like, they've been going on for years, and the positive impact it's had on thousands of schools throughout the country over the last number of years is almost immeasurable. The rapport that's built up between parents and schools, the rapport that's built up with children during the summer, that positive relationship with teachers that's brought in to the new school year, then we need you to show that off to the inspector. We need them to see what's going on, the work that's going on the ground. So as I said, you have a checklist. Make sure you've ticked all those boxes. Make sure when the inspector come in that they're able to say, bang, bang, everything is ticked off, child protection, etc. That's all been done. Now we can enjoy the positive experiences. We can watch different lessons. We can engage with kids, engage with the teachers, and really enjoy the whole positive experience of the camp. Then, as I say, hopefully they go back to the guys who organise the funding, and we get to all have the same crack again next year. That's what it's all about. Don't get nervous or apprehensive about it. Put in the planning. Once the planning is there, it'll work, and it always works. It's a great formula, and the kids love it, teachers love it, and parents are so appreciative of it. So I just, some schools will get a visit, and just be ready, I suppose. And so then the next thing is our Padlet. This is our new updated one-stop shop for anything you might need during the summer camp. It begins on the left-hand side. I think Kate's going to click into the Padlet there, and I advise everyone just to grab that link, open it up, because you can, for the rest of the evening, we're going to be referring to it frequently, so you'll be able to access it. The summer camp documents, as I said, a huge amount of the queries I get during the summer are for people looking for things that are right there in the summer camp documents. The handbook, the reflective journal for the kids, and queries and support. The camp report at the end is in there, and it's been updated with this year's checklist as well, so have a good look in there. Then we've got a fantastic literacy folder with loads of activities, numeracy and STEM, which is going to be very important this year with the new maths curriculum, a huge section on Gaeilge, and I said during your DEIS camp, why not introduce a bit of Gaeilge? You'll hear more about that later this evening as well. EAL, Dahi mentioned that, crucial for us in DEIS schools, playful digitals and literacy and numeracy, and there's a well-being section as well. So it's all there, it's at your fingertips. This is a great chance for you to look through it, highlight things that you hear tonight, maybe take note of them, bookmark them, star them, and have them ready for when you sit down to plan your lessons for the camp. It's all there in one place, and it's going to be a really helpful resource. So that's me, folks. Gormila Magav. I'm going to pass you on to the lads, and they're going to take you through some of the learning and language experiences that you can include during your camp. Gormila.
Thanks, Alan. Hi, folks. My name is David O'Callaghan. I'm a facilitator for AJA. I've been involved in the DEIS Summer Camp program for the past number of years now. I'm a recently appointed principal of a DEIS school in Drogheda, and we're actually embarking on the DEIS Summer Camp program for the first time this year. So I'm coming at this from a number of perspectives. So it's useful to see it from both sides. But just when we look at this slide, many of you would have seen this slide before. It's a key slide in terms of the handbook, and really what it sets out are the overarching principles and domains of the summer camp program. So in the center of the graphic there, you can see the overarching principles are that language learning occurs in a playful and interactive way. That point has already been made several times. It's key that fun is the main I suppose, pedagogical approach being taken through the summer camp program. It's so important. It is the summer camp as opposed to school. In terms then, pupils are regarded as co-designers of the summer camp, and that starts at the planning phase. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more in a few moments' time about how we could, involve the children in that design of the camp. But the rationale for that is clear because it promotes a sense of involvement and motivation, and just that overall sense of excitement that they have a tangible impact on what's being planned for. The third one there, so learning, teaching, and assessment reflect and impact on school practice. So in other words, it's meaningful would be the key word that I would come to mind there at that point. And then the fourth one, the pupil's well-being and sense of belonging are central to the camp. And I know Dahi pointed towards the NEPS resources, for example, that would be particularly useful in that regard. But these overarching principles, they're set out in what's called 4 domains, and you'll see those around the edge of the graphic there. And they are learner outcomes, playful learning experiences, varied learning environments, and camp management. But you will see this graphic and a lot more information about it on page 13 and 14 of the handbook. And as Alan just said, the handbook is just invaluable. So I would encourage you to read that carefully. But over the next few slides, we are going to explore each of these principles further. So we move on, please, Kate. Thank you. If we think about the success criteria for camp management, the checklist that Alan has taken you through a few slides previous is just really essential in terms of camp management, and it really is very helpful in that regard. But the first point that we have on this slide, collaboration is so important. So the organizer, the teachers, and the pupils all have a shared role in terms of planning the camp. And I know we will talk about parental involvement as well, because there's a key role there for parental involvement too. It's important that we have an orderly, secure, and a safe and healthy learning environment. And that's a shared responsibility as well throughout the process. The department requirements in terms of child protection and safeguarding, these areas are very important. They're essential that they're fulfilled. Full attendance and punctuality, they really have to be forefronted and encouraged. And I know, Dahi spoke there about the starting time, for example. So careful consideration needs to be given to what's the optimum starting time that we think will encourage children and give them the best chance at coming in on time. So that's very important. I know there was a question in the chat there in relation to funding and the optimal use of funding. That's really essential. And where that can often come up is in terms of, for example, providing lunches. But I know to speak from my own experience, I've been contacting our supplier of school meals to the school, and they've been very forthcoming and very willing to support us in any way they can. They've been very helpful in that regard, so I'd encourage you to have that conversation. I suppose it's important that in terms of the management of the camp, that there's evidence that the team are planning high quality learning experiences that are, I suppose, planned is the key word, that they're really thought out in relation to the interests, needs, and abilities of the children in the camp. So that's going to be important. And lastly, look, you really need to plan for and to consider opportunities for meaningful parental and community involvement. And I know we'll speak to a few possible ways that you could do that over the course of this evening's webinar. So I know Dahi wants to talk in relation to the next slide. He's going to talk about child safeguarding. So I'll pass you back to Dahi for a few moments. Thanks, folks.
Now, again, Gur Magav, listen to me, guys. Gur Mil Magav asking the question of talk or if you're asking some incredible questions. And God knows, Aideen at this moment and Ulton are on the coffee to get them through. In child safeguarding, I suppose, more than anything else, and some of the questions are coming in about, will the Kiggery look for my daily plans? Will they look for this? The first thing that I think is that a level 1 check is done from the DLP when one goes in. Who is responsible? Who is there? And again, we come back to the manager as opposed to the organizer. But the big thing is that the names of the acting DLP and the DDLP need to be displayed prominently. So the first thing I would love to see if we come into a camp, and we're not, neither Alan nor I is going to come into a camp this year, but if someone comes in, the first thing they should see on the door is who is the DLP and who is the DDLP. Very, very important. So that's number one. Number two, the appropriate training. Some of you have already put up, if I've done the training for the HSE and I've done this before, is that the same thing? Yes, it is. But if not, again, with the link that Aideen put in there, there is online training available just in case someone is going to be the camp manager, who is there, of course, all of the time and has not taken that training. Again, if in doubt, come and ask us that question. So appropriate training is there at all particular times. And the important thing is that that training is done prior to the commencement of the summer program, because the board of management is very important in this. Because at the end of the day, you are doing what you would normally do during the year and taking in loco parentis. Again, you're in charge of the kids. If anything happens, God forbid, and you haven't got that training done, you don't want to go there. So make sure you've got that training. And if in doubt, contact Aideen, Dr. Aideen, contact Alan, contact myself, contact Ulton, contact Joan, contact Siobhan in the education centres and ask us. And in accordance with the 2017 protocols, the school's risk assessment and child safeguarding statement should take account of the summer programme activity. So it's very important that inside in that document you have mentioned that you are running a summer camp. Now, just be careful. I'm going to get shot here. Some of the insurance companies come along and they go, that's a couple of extra quid, lads. No, it's not. Basically, as we've seen in the years gone by, someone will chance their arm always. But you've got insurance in the school, and because it is a school-related activity, then the fact is that make sure you have it written into the document that the summer camp is taking place. And if anyone asks you for any extra payment on it, just kind of say to them, hop, skip and jump. In other words, the year of the Olympics, go away for yourself. Just don't do it, because we've seen that happen. And I think Alton and Aideen and Alan would agree with this. So again, it's important that it is mentioned in the document, in the procedures of the school's risk assessment and child safeguarding statement, that it's in there. And also, procedures need to be in place to ensure that they have the anti-bullying policy. You're still following through. They're still at school. So that which you would normally apply for anti-bullying and procedures would be implemented in the same way should it happen, should anything take place. And the important thing is you're not there as a child minder. Because look, come on, as former DEIS principal, etc., some parents will look at us as childminders, and here's an easy one for the summer. So when you're choosing your children, as someone wrote recently, make sure you're choosing them according to the need as to what you can provide to the kids most at need. But if someone in any way breaks the rules of the school, the ethos, the essence, then ensuring that you have child safeguarding, the anti-bullying policy is there, and the board of management are informed again of any incidents through the school manager, depending who that will be, of any incidents of bullying, because it's still in the school environment. So that's very, very important. If you have any questions about child safeguarding, that which you do every day of the week is continued into the summer camp, the Campi Saurig. So in no way is it less important, but again, dare I say to repeat, make sure that inside in your documents, inside in the sense of where it is that you have mentioned that you're running the summer camp. Okay, good, Margaret.
Thanks, Dahi. So look, we can move on, please, Kate. Yeah, so we're going to just consider parental involvement now for a few moments. It's been mentioned a few times there already, but it really is a key component of the camp. It's highly recommended that you try and encourage as much parental involvement as possible. So we're just going to think about a few forms this might be able to take place in. So in terms of involving parents in the process, for example, a pre-camp survey, perhaps a Google form could be a useful way of doing it. You know, making contact with parents and informing them of maybe the theme of the camp, for example, whether it is the Olympics or whatever it might be. And maybe asking them their opinion about some activities that they feel that the children may enjoy. That's a potential way of encouraging that involvement. I know some schools previously have provided reading lists and activity lists that maybe could promote that link between home and school and home and the camp. there's also quite a number of schools would choose to have a performance over the course of the week. So whether it be a show and tell, and quite often they would invite in parents to watch that. We will speak about your local library. We'll speak about that towards the end of the presentation. But I know that a school last year organised that the parents could come in to the library with the children, and it was a great way of promoting good practice in that regard. Look, we're going to come shortly now to Alan and Ciara, just maybe to hear some practical examples of how they have encouraged parental involvement. So we might come to Alan there first, please.
Thank you, David. Yeah, David mentioned the Google form, which we've seen over the last years in a number of schools, really effective, and it's a great way to get the children and the parents involved in the use of technology as well. So what you would need to do is, I suppose, well in advance of the camp, choose your campers, choose the kids that are going to be involved, and make contact with the parents. You could use your Aladdin or whatever way you digitally communicate with your parents. Send out a Google form. That Google form is your application form for the summer camp, but it could also contain a very simple questionnaire. Maybe you could ask them about the types of sports they'd like to do during the camp, the types of art lessons, the type of music they'd like to use for a potential camp song, the type of foods they might like to be available during lunches. It gets the kids excited about what's going to come up in the camp. It gives the parents an understanding of what the camp is all about, and they immediately have a bit of ownership and a bit of involvement. And then when you've done that, so you've got your parents involved early, the kids are excited, the parents know about it, and then during the course of the camp, then some of these have been mentioned, but you can bring the parents in, help with the preparation of food, help with the serving of lunches. You can bring them in for library visits. You can bring them in at the end for your show and tell. They're just ways of, again, it's all about that meaningful engagement. We say this all the time, but my favorite thing, or one of my favorite things about working on summer camps, is those relationships that you can build up with a parent during the summer camp. They come in, it's a different environment. Some of the fear they might have surrounding school is not there because it's during the summertime. Some of your most marginalized families get so much enjoyment for the summer camp. It's a week where they're expecting to have the kids at home, and then they're in there in the school, they're getting prizes, they're being well looked after, they come home, they leave school excited for once and looking forward to going back the next day. And then that relationship you build up with the parent. They say, there's Mr. Nelson there, he's in during the summer, he's been good to my child. Then in September, if you have a tricky situation to deal with, if you have a parent who needs to be called in for an IEP or something like that, or you have that relationship built up, there's a bit of trust there, and the parent will be on your side. And that's what we need. We know we're all working in DEIS schools. You need to have the parents on side. You need to have that good community relationships. And the summer camp is an ideal opportunity to build up that relationship with your most difficult families and the families who need that support the most. So I'd say get involved early and maybe use the Google Forms or some of those other ideas, and make sure you get meaningful engagement with your parents throughout the camps. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alan. There's so much there. Very, very useful. I suppose before we come to Ciara, two things that come to mind there would be trying to remove barriers for parents to get involved. So I'm thinking there of maybe linguistically diverse communities that might be in our schools. So it might be a useful idea there to make use of some translation tools to allow them to access that particular form. Also, if you happen to have a HSCL, they can be such an invaluable person to sort of make that link and assist a family who maybe aren't engaging with a survey, for example, for whatever reason. They can be really useful in terms of bridging that gap. Ciara, I know Alan has gone through a substantial amount there, but have you any other suggestions there in terms of promoting that parental involvement piece?
Yeah, what I found useful was the self-assessment booklet, the camp booklet that the children fill in on a daily basis, because we get the children to maybe write, just list at some point during the day 3 activities that they've done that particular day. And then on towards the end of the week for the, just as we see there on the screen, just what they're able to do now. And then when they can then specify the one that they found fun, that they enjoyed the most that day. Then on about the 4th day of the camp, we sent that booklet home so that the parents could have a look and see, because children are great for going home and saying sometimes some are great for telling what they've done, and some of them might be saying, oh, we did nothing or whatever. So it's great to have that camp booklet for the parents to see what the children have written and to talk to them at home about the activities they've taken part in. And then we got the parents to, we asked the parents, would they just make some suggestions for next year's camp? And through that, over the years, what's really come out very strongly is the use of the outdoor environment. That, you know, even though every day we would always, the teachers on their timetable would always have planned for one outdoor activity, the parents were still looking for more outdoor activities. So bringing, you know, the maths and the literacy outside, maths trails and so on, and use of the outdoor environment was coming up very strongly there through the questionnaire. But I found the camp booklet just a good resource there to get the parents talking to their children at home and giving some feedback to us on other suggestions. And also, you know, when we went out on trips to some, when we went on a bus to, like, we went to the beach one year, we went to the library and so on, at some point we always kind of sent a text if to where we'd be and the particular time, and our parents were welcome to join us at any stage, and some of them did. And again, as Alan was saying, they give that chance to have that informal chat with the parent, and they'd give some more feedback on what the children were enjoying and so on. So just plenty of opportunities there that I suppose aren't as easy, ways of accessing and building that relationship with parents that aren't as easy as during the school year, where it's busier and bigger numbers of children and so on.
Thanks so much, Ciara, and thanks, Alan. It's great to get those first-hand examples of what has worked for you. And I suppose it is all about embedding those positive practices between home and school. So yeah, thanks so much for that. We'll move on, please, Kate, to the next slide. So we're going to just explore success criteria now for learner outcomes. And as I said, learner outcomes is one of our domains of the DEIS Summer Camp Programme. It's important that learner outcomes are directly related to the pupils' identified needs in literacy or numeracy. But when you think about that, we will speak about assessment shortly, but your starting point there really could and should be your school's DEIS plan, because you're not starting from zero in terms of this. You have reflected as a school on this already, so it's such a great resource to draw from the outset. And sometimes you would hear anecdotally that some schools maybe overlook their DEIS plan in terms of preparing for the DEIS Summer Camp Programme. So that would be a shame, because you've all got that work done and there to draw from. So I really would strongly encourage you to do that. The second consideration there, I suppose we want to encourage pupils to reflect on their own learning, that self-assessment piece. And I know we've just seen a graphic there recently of the My Summer Camp Learning Journey booklet, which is available on the Padlet. And look, that's not entirely prescriptive. I know some schools use that in its entirety. Some schools dip in and out of it. But I suppose you need to consider what would work in your unique context to encourage children to reflect on what they've learned. It was said at the outset, I think by Dahi, the importance of promoting and encouraging motivation and choice in your summer camp. And to that end, I know one of the overarching principles is that pupils are co-designers of the camp. And that really, it's just inextricably linked between that motivation piece and that engagement piece. So it's keeping them involved and giving them a sense of agency and a sense of ownership. It's really, really important that children feel that they have that sense of safety to be involved, to express their opinions. And it really, you know, as well as everything else, it feeds towards their overall sense of well-being. So it's just so fantastic. And the next consideration there is that, you know, the planned learning outcomes make meaningful links with the work of the school. So to be honest, this really is where it's essential to link back to your DEIS plan, because your school has a particular focus in mind, and it's important that the summer camp, I suppose, links in with that and works towards that. I know what's been useful in the past is some schools have used these sorts of considerations and framed them as questions, for example. So, for example, are the learner outcomes related to our pupils' individual needs? Are pupils able to talk about and reflect on their learning? And you could nearly use that as a sort of a checklist in itself. So that's one potential use of it for you. We'll move on to assessment, which it follows on pretty neatly. But I suppose assessment is going to be relevant from now on, way before the campy ever runs, because it's relevant in terms of the selection of pupils, I suppose, isn't it? So you're starting to think of assessment straight away. And when you think about pupils being forefronted as co-designers of the camp, that whole thing of self and peer assessment is going to be very, very important too. There are suggestions about this, by the way, on page 13 of the teacher's booklet, which are really useful. But some potential ways of assessing, I suppose, would be using the success criteria from the previous slide, for example. That whole promotion of effective feedback from teacher to child, from child to child. I know some schools would, if they were encouraging parents to come in and get involved in some shared reading, for example, that whole feedback loop can be promoted through that. But on the right-hand side of the graphic, you'll see we have a few different, they're suggested assessment strategies, that they're potential ones. It's by no means an exhaustive list. The first one there, tag, so that's tell, ask, and give. So for example, tell me something you liked about your partner's story. Ask a question that you'd like to find some more information about. Was there a character that you had a query about, for example? And give, could you give a suggestion about how your fellow pupil could develop their story a little bit more? So it's just a framework for promoting that reflective language, because as we know, promoting that rich language experience is a key aspect of the summer camp in itself. I'm not going to go through each one of those assessment strategies, but they're just suggested ways that you might use. But you'll find more information, as I said, on page 13 and also on page 17 of the camp handbook. So we'll move on, please, to rich language experiences, which I suppose I alluded to that just in the last few seconds there, but it really is a key aspect of the program in itself. And I know we've heard from Alan and Kira in relation to trying to incorporate that rich language experience over the course of the week. It's fundamental, and the reason it needs to be fundamental is because if we look at those quotes that we have on the screen, it just really sets out the rationale of why we need to work on this language development. So at age 6, a typical child from a mid-ranking socioeconomic background will know about 10 to 11,000 words, whereas at the age 6, a child from a socially disadvantaged background may know as few as 2,500. So that's certainly a profound difference at the age of 6. So it does set the scene as to why, as we all know, it does set the scene as why we really need to focus on language development. Research shows as well that it's not just word recognition in terms of vocabulary that's important. It's that whole contextual knowledge as well. So if we think about disciplinary literacy, for example, I know we mentioned the primary maths curriculum there earlier on, but disciplinary literacy is the language required to access a particular discipline. So I know as teachers, we'd all remark on the fact that maybe one of our pupils struggles with worded problems in maths. And it mightn't necessarily be a numeracy issue. It could be that literacy issue, that it's the language piece that's causing challenges there. So you'll see that through playful learning experiences, there are opportunities to focus on language and to develop language across the curriculum. So regardless of what the activity might be. Okay, and just I suppose to point you towards some resources, the PDST STEM, the STEM team, they have what's called the Let's Talk resource, and it's a great support in terms of mathematical problem solving, like I just spoke about. So that can be accessed through the Padlet and also through the STEM tab at the top of the IJA Primary Maths Curriculum Hub. So you'll see Kate is just showing that on the screen there at the moment. Okay, so I'm going to pass you over there to Crohur, who is going to talk about playful learning experiences.
Gymag David. Díomh Carda Crohur Léir is Dom. Tá mi gobar mar chóilta le hiide fill ach is múntóir bonscoil múntóir ranga mé chumá. So as David said there, next we're going to have a look at success criteria for these playful learning experiences that we've been speaking about all evening. And I might reference some practical resources which are available on the Padlet as well that help us provide for the same learning experiences. So I suppose one thing to consider is that when we're designing your summer camp, we need to consider what playful learning experiences are used in our school already. So here we might link in with what's going on in Ashton, what's going on with regards to approaches and methodologies in the primary language curriculum, STEM, creative dance, orienteering, process, drama activities, and so on. The list is nearly endless, really, of various different things that are going on in various different schools. And we might harness these activities, these approaches, these methodologies as well in order to provide for the playful learning experiences. So I suppose in essence, the activities that you design, and indeed the summer camp as a whole, is very much as well in the well-being space. So it's something that we constantly need to keep in mind. I know that Dahi mentioned this earlier on in his introduction. So I suppose when we look at success criteria, then what are they? Well, I suppose a successful camp is one where, if we look there at the first, that pupils are highly engaged in stimulating and playful learning activities, again, as referenced in the primary language curriculum. And just to give you a quote here from it, it says that play makes a major contribution to literacy in the opportunities it provides for children's oral language, which is an important contributor to developing overall literacy. And again, that's a reference there to what's quoted in the NCCA support materials. So the second criterion then that we'd be looking at is that pupils are active, that they work collaboratively. I know that there's been a lot of talk about collaboration between the pupils and the teachers in designing the summer camp, and that they undertake tasks that are appropriately challenging. So if you want more ideas there on working collaboratively and active learning as well, there's a great, very, very practical old PDSD, now IDA document on the Padlet as well, on active learning methodologies. So that's up there on the Padlet. Browse it there at your own leisure, but it's chock-a-block full of really, really practical ideas for active learning. Again, to look at further success criteria, where the pupils are engaged in activities where they solve everyday problems. And we can see here maths coming into play there as well. So the importance and the usefulness of problem solving in terms of literacy acquisition it can't be understated, really. And children will invariably need to ask questions, which we know. And even tá an tanga of unagring, as gailge mátá, gailge nú bíorla mar EAL of unagring, taking me in some countess na dachirtí in a gring ná, a one is the poishi kundas keshna a her. Well, we would say the same really in developing their language in English as well, that asking questions can sometimes be quite a challenge in language learning. Debating, articulating their points as well as they can, as they endeavor to solve problems as well. So problem solving is a huge one here. By posing problems to the pupils which they can relate to, we can provide, I suppose, meaningful stimulus for rich literacy and, of course, then numeracy experiences. So once again, if you're looking for some practical ideas around, well, where can I go, where can I get ideas for, I suppose, these rich learning experiences, for the rich literacy and numeracy experiences, IDA has STEM Smuinta online resources. Now, we've linked them up on the Padlet there as well, but they're also available on the IDA website. So it's the IDA STEM Smuinta online resources. Again, very, very practical, useful ideas and activities to support the development of the STEM subjects, the science, technology, engineering, and maths. So the last of the criteria then that we'll be looking at in this section, and as David and Alan have already mentioned, the pupils are enabled to gain, I suppose, what we would call a sense of ownership and responsibility for their learning. So, as I said, the pupils are seen as co-designers of the camp, which should give them a sense of ownership and belonging. And this would be a very important consideration for us when we're designing our summer camps. So that, in a nutshell, are, I suppose, what we would consider the success criteria for playful and learning experiences. But next, we're going to go on and have a look at, well, what exactly are the characteristics then of playful and learning experiences? And they're bullet pointed here, but in a nutshell, I suppose there are a number of characteristics which are common in play and in playful learning experiences. So the first one there, active, that play is active and children use their bodies and their minds in play. And you might use a resource like busybodies or something like that to get them more active, to get them more, I suppose, physically involved as well. They interact with their environment, with material, and with other people. So we're looking at intra and interpersonal characteristics there as well. The second characteristic that we'd have a look at would be that play helps children to explore the unknown and to be adventurous and risky, it says there, but you know, we'd be sensible about what's adventurous and risky as well. But the pretend element, I suppose, we would see this hugely in Ashton as well, that the pretend element offers a safety net that encourages children to take risks. Communication, it's a huge aspect of any part of the curriculum that we're trying to deliver to the children, that children communicate through their play. We know this by sharing information and knowledge. So this communication can be verbal or non-verbal, it can be simple or complex, and really would depend on the situation, it would depend on the child's ability, it depends on what we're trying to gain, it depends on the learning outcome as well. But we know that communication is a huge characteristic of play and playful learning. I know that Dahi mentioned this here again at the start as well, and I think it's been reiterated by everybody else as well, that well, it should be enjoyable. And I know that we're talking about what needs to be done, and we're talking even a little about the theory, and that this is grounded in theory and grounded in research. But in the heat of the hunt, when everything is said and done, it needs to be enjoyable for the children. I know that Alan mentioned there earlier on about, you know, part of the success criteria would be, you know, having full attendance. Well, if it's enjoyable, you'll be more assured of full attendance if what you're doing is enjoyable for the children. The next characteristic then is that meaningful play for children is based on what they have seen and heard and what they know. So it recalls for me, I remember years ago teaching a lesson Australia on Igbalus Meradua Erihanor, and a kicker pointed out to me, said, looking at the children, I was teaching quite an urban area, saying these children don't know what a smear dove is, let alone a Dolamakan Son Igbalus Meradua. So that would be, I suppose, an example of how a lesson may not have been meaningful. So I suppose we need to draw on what the children know. We need to draw on the children's experiences in order for what we're teaching to be meaningful for the children. So play helps children to build and extend their knowledge, understanding and skills in a way, I suppose the point I'm making is that makes sense to them. The next characteristic then that we look at then would be that children play alongside or with others. Sometimes they also like and need to play alone, and that's fine as well. Again, depending on the child, depending on the circumstances, depending on what we're trying to achieve as well. So when we're using a playful approach for learning, either in the class or at home, or you know, a child on the road or with other children, we need to bear these characteristics of play and playful learning in mind. So I'm going to move on there to, I suppose, very briefly look at the 5 pedagogical practices in maths. And as somebody who's recently received his training in the new maths curriculum, this is all very, very fresh for me there as well. But there's a lot here, I suppose, to dissect, but there's a lot to like in this as well. So if we look at the first quote there, from the primary maths curriculum on page 29, it says that mathematical learning can be greatly enhanced in a play environment that is interactive, engaging, inclusive, and supportive, and to provide opportunities for exploration, investigation, challenge, creativity, choice, and independence. That quote there could actually belong to the previous slide there when I was talking about the characteristics of play and playful learning. So we see that play then is a huge central tenet of the primary maths curriculum. Indeed, if you look on the right-hand side there, we'll see that the 5 pedagogic practices in the primary maths curriculum are further, I suppose, explained in this resource material. Again, that we have this resource material up on the Padlet also. So I mentioned that there were 5 pedagogical practices in the primary maths curriculum, which are, I suppose, promoting maths talk, the use of cognitively challenging tasks, encouraging mathematical modeling, encouraging playfulness, and fostering productive disposition. So you can see there in the bottom left-hand corner, the jigsaw piece, that graphic there with the jigsaw pieces, and we can see then that there are empty jigsaw pieces around as well. And I suppose this denotes or highlights to us that the empty pieces are there deliberately because these are not the only pedagogies. These practices highlighted here should not be considered to be exhaustive or even hierarchical, but they are pedagogical practices which are recommended in the primary maths curriculum. So the 5 pedagogical practices then presented in the slide are rooted in research, as I said already, and they're acknowledged to be, I suppose, essential in the provision of quality mathematical learning experiences. Now, this might sound very highfalutin and might sound very theoretical, but we're going to go into have a look at some practical examples there of stuff that we can use in our summer camps. That we'll do it right now, actually. But before we look at those practical examples there, can I just draw your attention there to the STEM there, that through appropriate, playful, engaging learning experiences, children should be enabled to. Now, we've seen this a couple of times already before. So first of all, I suppose the first time that we were introduced to this particular STEM was the publication of the primary language curriculum. And we see this is the STEM that precedes all of the learning outcomes, but there's also a STEM for the primary maths curriculum. So playful learning, then I suppose it goes on to highlight, is appropriate for all children. So it's not just a national thing that goes on in junior infants, it's a national thing that goes on in Rangoshay as well, and right throughout the school. So when children engage in play during a maths lesson, they are more engaged, they feel less threatened, and this will eventually encourage the risk-taking that I mentioned earlier on, and opportunities to deepen their understanding, and I suppose thereby to improve mathematical proficiency amongst the children. Playful learning allows children to lead their own learning, and it offers opportunities for choice, exploration, and hopefully independence as well. And through playful learning experiences, children understand the value of maths, and having real-life playful mathematical lessons shows the learner the importance of maths in their everyday lives. So just a couple of notes there on the process of the play. Now we have a graphic here showing us testing, discovering, revising, and so on. But just a few notes there said that playful learning is appropriate for children across all stages in primary school. Children's learning experiences in maths, as in other areas of learning, is characterized by play and playfulness. Play provides a context for maths thinking and the development of maths language and concepts, and through play, children can be supported to make choices about their learning. So I'm just going to very briefly just go through the primary maths curriculum hub there, as hosted by Ida there. So if we go, yeah, and there's a link to that on the padlet there as well. So thank you, Kate. So we went to the resources there, and we go to the Spark Mathematical Wonder in Micromaths there, and if you just scroll down there, you just see, so I've used some of these games in my own classroom, and the language, let alone the maths, but the language that I'm getting out of the children is extraordinary, really. Now, my own background, I'm teaching in a Gael school, so we have an extra, I suppose, focus or an extra emphasis on, say, Tíormíocht as Gaeilgeans on the Winna Páistí now, and Tíormíocht the Hishkent, and Tíormíocht Usaid Cuma. And I don't think that's any different to mainstream schools which teach through English as well. But some of the activities, some of the resources that are in the sub there, here's Kate is showing us here, add one out. So if you just look there at any one of these here, just consider the mathematical language that the children would use in identifying which is the odd one out. And in doing so, actually, just to tell you, in odd one out, any one of them could be the odd one out. But the children need to rationalize, they need to justify why one would be, why one of these boxes would be the odd one out. For example, if I look here at the cylinder, I can say that the cylinder is the odd one out there because the Imlína and Timlína Darg, or I might have a look at the cone and say, well, the cone is the odd one out here because it's pink and the others are blue, and so on. But the children come up with their own justifications as to why one box or one section would be the odd one out as opposed to the other three. And they'll all be right, but they need to give a justification for that. Other resources there that are available in the hub. There's always, sometimes, and never. Some of you are probably familiar with that already, whereby the children learn to, I suppose, critically examine mathematical statements in a fun and once again in a collaborative way. So here again, Kate is showing you some examples of always, sometimes, never activities. We might just move on there, Kate, as well. If you might go back and go into Number Talk. You see there's the second one there, thanks. And Number Talk, I suppose this facilitates short, collaborative discussions around a given maths problem. And if you go back once again there, so sorry, some examples there. And we see maths eyes. I'm not going to go through all of them, we won't have time. Maths eyes, this will tie in very, very nicely with what we've been talking about previously and what we'll mention again when we talk about maths trails and science trails and STEM trails as part of our summer camp as well throughout the school. So again, that's just to give you an idea of where you can go to, I suppose, to get ideas there around play and playful learning experience of the children in the teaching of mathematics. So once again, the emphasis of this camp, one of the emphasis of the summer camp is literacy and numeracy. We can see here really how literacy and numeracy come together in so many ways there in the teaching of maths. I suppose in a sense, it shows the complements of literacy and numeracy skills. It shows where they combine and where they enhance each other as well through their development. So, most people and bugger right and somebody, the communicative approach of me there, Aspirla and Kirk from a side of Bader and Sangra Far Ahna and Quidgib and Son Air. So, the communicative approach, in a sense, Cormoon in the Grail gets nearly the only game in town. So, it's an approach to teaching and language skills that's highly recommended. And start knowing Mar Dortme and Kirk from a side of me there and Son Asquelga. And in Ireland, it is the recommended approach for the teaching of Irish. You'll find an overview of the communicative approach as well in your handbook. So it's a learner-centered approach where the main emphasis is on, obviously, communication, with the teacher fulfilling communicative need. So communicative opportunities are created for the learners to engage with the language in various contexts. For example, then we might do something like role play, drama, communicative games, Bedron Sangwil Oishinos, Tomas Nahordoiga, a critic of our skull, Gaveta Shiveshinu side. And Stay David and Sunny Sluya, like Tears the chance and son. Bedron Sangaval, Cap Nouveau and son of Yen of Gniviet Nouveau, Yen of Asquelge, Marchrid, then Marchrid and Compass Aurig. But even if we're not going to use any, say, approaches Asquelge in the Compass Aurig, when it comes to the teaching of language, the communicative approach is one that is highly recommended. So I suppose you could call it an iterative approach, which is most apparent in the third stage, in the post-communicative phase, as it involves reflecting on what occurred in order to move forward. So in a sense, it's kind of similar to the gradual release responsibility model that we'd all be familiar with. And you may need to teach specific speaking and listening skills to junior infants, but that's not taught or covered. We don't go near it again. That skill will need to be observed. It'll need to be revised and revisited throughout the year and throughout the entire primary school experience. So again, there'll be a Padlet available to you as well with regards to Kirkwood Kermasoida, Agus Winter Lahag, Better Captain at Ayen and Son, Chivan the Vegas, Tasha Shin, Ash Barrington Son, Egg, Kate, Stephen Son. So you might decide you might have a look at Olicht or Drawmicht or Kjol or even Corpidakis, be another very popular one. Agus Bedig make Grant Captain of Wunig of the Gailing, Anihimpli of Wunig of Chivan the Gailing of Darnoy. Or in another, I suppose, sense, we could have a look at the communicative approach in the teaching of English as an additional language, or even enhancing other speakers of English their skills as well. Mata hele Olish Tashta doing some real and Kirk Conversator to overtakiert or follow some curriculum tanga the Bunskala, we Halibu Tanga August Kirk we get Conversator. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there and we'll move on there to speak a little bit there about the teacher's role. Now, I know this has been mentioned a good few times already, but I think no harm just to recap on the main points that have been made. So when we're using playful and engaging approaches, there are some considerations to be taken into account. And these are relevant when providing playful and engaging learning experiences across all stages of the curriculum. So the role of the teacher, as it says there in the quote from the primary language curriculum, is to support and develop children's thought during processes of exploration, discovery, and problem solving. So if we look at the main points there, I suppose the first one then is talking about the teacher having a good pedagogical content knowledge and to be clear on what he or she wants the children to learn or to experience. The second point then would be that open-ended questioning can be useful to allow the teacher into the play scenario or drama. The other one then is that quality more than quantity is paramount here when it comes to choosing appropriate, suitable, accessible resources for the children. We need to create scenarios based on the children's interests and their curiosities, and that's good child-centered practice, and we know that as well. Again, I know that Dahi has mentioned this and that Alan has mentioned this earlier on as well. We need to be mindful to ensure that a safe space, both physically and in terms of acceptable behaviours, are provided for as well. And this helps to create a positive classroom culture. And the last one, then, talking about theory and talking about research and sending you here and sending you there to look for resources. But the last one that I think is probably most important of all is let your guard down. Don't be afraid to let your guard down. Let the children see that you're enjoying these playful and engaging approaches alongside with them. Okay, so we'll just move on then to just very briefly. I'm going to talk to you about the fourth domain there, the success criteria for varied learning environments. And I know that we got some great insights earlier on from Alan and from Ciara on these. But just to say there that careful consideration should be given to including a variety of outdoor and indoor learning environments that are, I suppose, that are welcoming and comfortable, the places that promote creativity, and they provide spaces for pupils to to be active and to be safe, which may necessitate smaller groups than you would typically have worked with. And I suppose learning environments that are conducive to the development of social skills and problem-solving skills. We can also use virtual environments such as Zoom for guest speakers and so on. I know that will be discussed again later on in this evening's workshop. We should also consider mentioning the virtual environment, how that could be used to provide playful, engaging learning experiences, storytelling or an interview through Zoom, taking a virtual tour, and so on. No, we needn't go into the virtual world either. We can just go to our own schoolyard and school grounds, a local green space, school library, school hall, general purpose room. A hula hoop and a patch of grass can be a learning environment for the children. You may place hula hoops there on a patch of grass and ask the children to record how many daisies, how many Cashew dandelions, how many, whatever plants you want to look at, how many they can see in each different hoop, how they would record that information, how they would feed back that information, and so on. That's a very, very simple learning environment there. And if you're looking for more ideas about varied learning environments within our school grounds, without ever having to leave the school, there are loads of ideas of maths trails and of science trails, of STEM trails there, again, on the Padlet, provided for you there as well. Again, take them, leave them. They may be appropriate for you, they may not be appropriate, they may suit your own school needs, they may not. But have a look at them anyway, and you might come up with your own particular trails. The Ashton room, again, is, if there was an Ashton room in the school, is very popular. The computer room could be a learning environment. Staff room, it says in my notes here. I'll leave that up to yourselves. Parents room, corridors, that's where our maths trails might be contained, as well as the classrooms. So once again, as I said, like, the Padlet is full of ideas here on varied different learning environments that we can provide for our children in the summer camps. So I think that's it from me there. We're going to move on there to, I suppose, another learning environment that we can use is making use of the library resources and the small town Cartagon. David, I think you're going to speak to us about the library resources. Absolutely.
Thanks, Cahir. Thank you for that. So a visit to your local library, it's always been recommended, and it's always been regarded as a very successful part of the summer camp program. So if it is feasible for you, it's a great way of, I suppose, promoting awareness of the library at all. For some children, it could be their first time visiting the library, for example. But I suppose we have some considerations there on the slide. But a key thing here is get in touch with your library in advance because, well, I suppose out of courtesy, firstly, but more often than not, your local librarian will be invaluable in terms of what they might be able to provide. You know, there's been great examples of libraries putting on free of charge guest speakers, for example. It could be a local storyteller. We'll hear from Ciara in a few moments just in relation to an example how she's promoted and how she's made use of the local library. But I'm thinking back to a conversation that I had with Alan previously, and he spoke about challenges in accessing his local library, but from talking to the librarian, they were only too happy to send out the library van to the school. So, you know, there are lots and ways of means of trying to incorporate the library into your camp. So it's really worthwhile. Just in relation to this, there's it was published by PDST, but it's now an IJA publication entitled Children's Books for Wellbeing, and it has, you know, a variety of suggestions for appropriate books which can, I suppose, support conversations and learning around children's well-being. So it can be very, very helpful. Ciara, if I may, could I ask you for an example of how you would have facilitated a library visit in your own experience, please?
Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, just similar to what you just said there. So we brought the children on a visit to the library. because we're a rural school, we get a bus into town, and I, as manager, I had obviously been in touch with the library, you know, a week or two in advance, and scheduled a visit, and they'd organised a storytelling session for the younger children, and they'd also organised a kind of like a book hunt in the library for the older group, that, you know, like a little kind of treasure hunt with clues, and they had to find particular books. So that was enjoyable for them. And the librarians were very keen to promote the library. So they gave some forms to the children to bring home, if they weren't a member of the library, that they could return at a future date with their parents with the completed forms. And again, because I texted in advance and told parents we'd be in the library at whatever time, some parents were free to drop in, and a few of them actually signed their children up there and then if they weren't members. So it gave all those opportunities. And because I'm a rural school, if I get a bus, I always try and tie something else in with it. So you know, there was a youth club nearby that I had a contact in, and they allowed us to use their games room for an hour, and the children absolutely loved that. Again, it was just something that was free, and it was making best use of the bus, and you know, kind of added to the library visit that we could do another activity, and they got to bake and just use their pool table and the games table and that kind of thing. So I just kind of to look for opportunities to maybe tie in something that might not cost too much with the trip to the library, and to bring the parents in on it and so on, if possible. That I just have found in the past that's worked for us. Thanks.
Thanks a million, Ciara. It's a great example there of being, I suppose, not even creative, but just using your budget wisely in terms. I know transport costs are rising, so yeah, that's very, very useful. We're just going to move on now to thinking about considerations for some of our learners for whom English is an additional language, which I'm sure is a consideration for many of you. But in terms, I suppose the first consideration, this is by no means an exhaustive list, but it's good practice to provide opportunities for multiple means of engagement and expression. Really, because this, you know, it promotes the involvement of a child for whom English is an additional language. Depending on how recently they may have arrived to your school, for example, you could have pupils that are in that well-documented silent phase. But I suppose providing multiple means of engagement, for example, singing, dancing, role play, mime, you know, and so on and so forth, it gives more roots in the activity for such a learner. It's considered to be really, really useful in that regard. It's, you know, we talk about the rationale for, I suppose, rich learning experiences in terms of language throughout the summer camp program, but for an EAL learner, it's so important to be intentional about the vocabulary that you really want them to focus on and to learn. And you know, it can be woven into any activity. So even if it was football, for example, maybe it's that you're trying to make that link between gestures. You could gesture kicking a ball, for example, and really try to consolidate that phrase. So it's that whole repetition piece would be really useful. In terms of the third point there, having access to translation tools of whatever sort. I know on our graphic we have Microsoft Translator. I've used it myself. I find it fantastic, but there are so many of them available nowadays. And you know that they're all very, very useful. I know even Aladdin, for example, there's just so many of them, but it's vital that you have them to hand. You know, they can be used as a scaffold. I'd use them judiciously. I wouldn't try and overuse it, but it is nice to have it to promote that sense of inclusion. Yeah, so they can be really useful. You know, in terms of trying to promote that sense of belonging, very, very useful and very important, sorry, you know, to promote that sense of belonging to, I suppose it provides validation for that child and that learner, because their home language is such a part of their identity. So if at all possible, it could be that maybe you allow them to speak their home language at times during the school day. It could be that, you know, if they need maybe a brain break, for example, that maybe they could have an activity in their home language. It can be really, really useful. I know in the earlier part of my career, it was something that maybe I was slightly intimidated about. I was trying to encourage, I suppose, Béarla One really. But like research would extensively show that you really must promote the child's first language and home language. So there may be times during the day where it's useful and helpful to allow them to speak in their own language, for example. Translanguaging can be very important, whether I suppose dipping in and out of English and their home language, that can be very useful. And I suppose the focus there is on communication. Is communication taking place? It's not, the focus is not always on perfect form of the English language. You know, on the Padlet, there's lots of suggestions for EAL and various supports, but one that I'd like to draw your attention to, it's one called LOTE for Kids, so LOTE, for the number 4 and kids. You can sign up to that through your local library. There's a licensing agreement that most libraries have, and you can see Kate pointing towards it there on the Padlet. You'll notice on the homepage, you can see there already from the graphic, you have all sorts of national flags there. But it's just such a great resource. It's extensive, and the fact that it's supported by your local library, it's just, you know, it's just such a great resource to have. You'll even see there's a Gaeilge there as well in it, for example, but there's all sorts of, it's just fantastic. On that theme, I suppose we will move on to digital tools more broadly. And I know the world is our oyster in terms of digital tools. You could talk for the whole session about digital tools for experiential learning, for inquiry-based learning, but we've just highlighted a few there, and I'm going to very, very quickly run through them. So this one certainly came to prominence over COVID, but that whole virtual museum tour. So you can use, for example, Google Arts and Culture to visit various landmarks around the world, whether it be the Colosseum, the pyramids, anything, you know, but it's just great. And depending on what theme you pick for your summer camp, you've all sorts of opportunities to maybe have a virtual tour connected to that. I know digital storytelling is something that many of us are using. A lot of you would have heard of Book Creator. It's absolutely fantastic. There's also Storybird. Children, in my experience, find them so engaging. That whole piece around self and peer reflection comes into play. The assessment piece, it creates so many possibilities. It's very, very useful. If we link back to the thought on our library session, you know, there's lots of online story times. Maybe if it wasn't possible to get to your library could point you towards maybe an online story session. And, you know, as we just spoke about LOTE for Kids, you would find stories in all languages there as well. So it's a great resource to have. Digital scavenger hunts, they can be very useful and engaging, particularly when we're trying to promote that whole sense of play and playfulness. So the scavenger hunt can create great excitement. Hopefully the weather stays fine for us and we can get outside. You know, you have other apps there like various nature exploration apps. So there's there's an app there called Seek. There's iNaturalist. So those apps there can help you learn about various plants and animals that you'd find in nature. I suppose there as well, there's various apps for animation. So there's a stop motion app there called Coma Coma, which is very engaging. The children love the whole piece around stop motion in it. I'm thinking Wallace and Gromit comes to mind when you think of stop motion. But it's a great way of promoting dialogue. And it's a great way of encouraging those rich language experiences we spoke about. And it can also be a lovely way to promote a sense of excitement, maybe about getting parents in to look at the projects that have been created. Similarly, with robotics, if you're lucky enough to have some robotics kits in your school, the sense of excitement when children could maybe show what they've created to their parents can be really, really lovely to experience, as you know. Okay, but look, I would encourage you to link back to the Padlet. There's so many links and resources there. So yeah, absolutely. Kate, we'll move on to our final slide for this evening, if that suits. So we've come to the end of our presentation, really. And at this point, I suppose I would refer you back to this graphic of our overarching principles and our domains. But I'd also like to really strongly encourage you, I suppose, to look back through the teacher handbook. There are so many resources in it. There are so many resources in the Padlet. But please remember as well that there's such a helpful team behind the DEIS Summer Camp program as well. So don't feel that you're stuck. For example, Alan and Dahi there, they're invaluable in terms of the advice and knowledge that they have on this. So don't feel that you're stuck if you do have queries. Okay, so I might invite Aideen just to make some closing remarks just before we finish up. Thank you, folks.
Thank you so much, David, and indeed to our whole panel this evening. We're so grateful to you. I suppose there's a number of things to say at this stage. Number one, our panelists putting our DEIS schools front and centre and the students, just to point that this is a voluntary engagement on behalf of the panelists. They give of their time behind the scenes in preparation and offering their shared expertise and learnings this evening, and some of them directly placed in DEIS camps themselves this summer and in preceding summers. So both myself and Ultan are indebted, as always, to the DEIS camp team. They are just wonderful to work with. And I suppose that nods to the work that we do, and that's with you yourselves, the schools. Year on year, we are so appreciative of the engagement. We are inspired by your commitment to your schools, and I mean that most sincerely. The stories that arise from the DEIS camps year on year are so heartening. They're so positive. It's one of the most positive programs that we're involved in, and I think all of us will hold our hands up to that. And I think now is the moment to affirm all of that and to credit all of you for all that you do for your schools. Engaging here tonight, not least in your hundreds. We really appreciate what you do for your students, those most vulnerable students out there. And our witness to it year on year is so affirming and so inspiring. And I mean that genuinely. Just a couple of things for clarity. Some stuff came up there, some main points that came up over and again. So just to clear up any confusion that may be there. First of all, in terms of the planning, you are not required to be highly prescriptive in your plans. You certainly aren't required to develop plans for individual students. You should have your pre-planning done. The organizer plays a big role in that, along with the teachers, and that should all be in place, your general planning schemes, your theme and so on of your DEIS camp before it even begins. So high-end planning is not a requirement. The allocation of funding is entirely to the discretion of the schools. A lot of people nodded to the fact that they may ask students to bring in their own lunches this year. That's perfectly acceptable, bearing in mind that healthy eating is one of the strands of the camps as well. Also, the timing and engagement. There's a bit of a confusion between the special ed camps and the DEIS camps. It's 4 hours contact time, engagement time daily, and 30 minutes lunchtime. So Dahi was quite right there, 22.5 hours per week for the DEIS camps, and recommended not to start any later than 10 a.m. So I hope that that might clear that up. The essential information booklet is very handy. There's a pamphlet on the website using that link that we gave you earlier for all of the portals. So that you might find helpful. And to reiterate that we are your support here this evening, and we will continue to be that support moving forward. We are on hand at the end of a phone, the end of an email, Dahi there, Alan, myself and Alton available to you as you progress with your camps, and even for their duration and thereafter with your reporting. So don't hesitate to contact us on those info emails. I don't know, Alton, if you'd like to add anything further.
Hi, Aideen. Yeah, no, genuinely just to thank everybody. I just see one of the last comments in there was to say, and I won't name the person lest I get caught for GDPR, but the comment was, last year was our first year running the camp and we thoroughly enjoyed it and the benefits were immense. Best of luck to all. And I suppose, you know, it's a nice one to finish on. That's why we're here. You know, the whole idea is it's enjoyable for the children and for those working on the camp as well, because if the teachers given the camp aren't enjoying it, the kids certainly won't enjoy it. So it should be a thoroughly fun and enjoyable experience for everybody. Go out and have a bit of crack. And the experience then for the children in their school just pays off dividends when you come back then in September. And you'll see that the relationships with the children, with their parents, and that they have with their school are strengthened for the participation of everybody. So míle maith, fair play to you.
Magat Alton, and indeed to all our panelists this evening. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise. And to all of you, we wish you the very, very best with your camps. We do hope that they are positive and rewarding. I'm quite sure that they will be. And don't be strangers to us. We are there to help support you throughout. So don't be afraid to reach out to us. Thank you so much for your time this evening.